welcome everybody
Welcome.
to a discussion on trust and control versus influence. What I'd like to do is I'd like to start in the chat, if you would please, and just identify where you're calling in from. I'd be real interested because I know we have people from all over the globe. So if you could just identify where you're calling, go down to the bottom and where it's, the chat bar and tell us. Okay, Colorado, yes. Yes, Michigan, Canada, Texas, Mexico.
Kuwait.
Brooklyn, gotta love a Brooklyn. Okay, Mexico, nice. Okay, very fun. Thank you, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're really glad that you're here. It's a conversation that's really important, and I would say buckle up, because today we're going to discuss trust. We are going to discuss some of the differences between control and influence, and we're going to share some stories about the impact that these very different leadership approaches have on results. But we'll also talk about how they can help you apply some of these principles within your life, your teams, and in your organizations. So please use hashtag #TrustVSControl to share on social throughout the webinar. You can also follow BlackWolf on hashtag BlackWolf for any kind of education, events, any kind of content. So another opportunity. So we're all facing this dilemma called the pandemic, right? And we face it sometimes with stress and uncertainty. And leaders must clearly recognize where they have control versus influence in their role as a leader, because it does influence outcomes. And so first, we say that you must trust yourself before you can trust others. We're going to explore that in some depth. That's a great conversation. In our webinar today, we're going to look and explore these concepts, but we'll also give you some very practical steps, some advice on how to apply them in your own world. Before we get going, I just want to introduce myself and Robert. First, Robert. The good news is we get to have a conversation today with our thought leader here at BlackWolf Consultants and the CEO and founder of BlackWolf Consultants. He does this work because he is really committed to organizations who are principle-driven and socially responsible in their business practices. It is key, and BlackWolf chooses to work with leaders and organizations who are committed to sustainable business practices, business strategies, and he's done this work for the past 25 years. He's worked with senior executives across different continents, industries, and cultures, and the work of BlackWolf Consultants really has produced a quantum shift in collaboration and communication effectiveness, and it generates extraordinary success for corporate clientele. So really happy to be in this conversation with you, Robert. I am part of BlackWolf Consultants and very proud to be. I am committed to leading from the inside out, and the work that I do is about helping leaders do the same. I have been an executive coach and facilitator with BlackWolf. I'm a senior consultant here, and I have known Robert, this is even better, I have known Robert for 25 years. So we have lots of history. So let's get started. You should know that we're going to take questions. We'll take them in the middle of the session, and then we'll take them again at the end. So please enter your questions in the Q&A section down at the bottom of the Zoom, and we'll make sure to get to as many of these questions as we possibly can. Okay? So, Robert, trust, kind of a big topic, and kind of a big topic as we're facing this pandemic. We talk a lot about trust at BlackWolf. We've got a lot of clients that we work with, and the underlying issues end up to be around trust. Talk to us a little bit about what trust means. I know that we work with the thin book of trust as a kind of a core foundational piece, but talk to us a little bit about that, would you?
Yeah, I guess what I want to talk about, Patty, as well is, that trust is really the foundation and recognized as the foundation to um, great, great leadership teams. Um, my perspective is that trust has been often used as a um, accusation.
Oh,
The I don't trust you.
yeah.
And what I'd like to talk about is I'd like to talk about how trust really starts with the individual.
Mm.
There was a great article in the last Harvard Business Review, and I think they nail it when they said the path to empowerment leadership doesn't begin with other people; it begins with yourself.
Yeah.
It begins with trusting yourself.
Yeah.
So, the Feltman model, I think, is really an outstanding model. And this comes from many, many, many years of reading everything on trust because it's such a foundational element to effectiveness and great leadership. I really have landed on the Feltman model because it really holds the whole human being in understanding what trust is. So it holds the context or the beliefs that a human being needs to have in order to trust, which is to be authentic or sincere in their communication, what it is that's coming out of their mouth, but also through the lens of caring. And I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it's crucially important in business and in life to care for yourself and care for each other. And so immediately when you communicate authentically and you communicate whatever it is that you have to say through the lens of caring, people are leaning in. It's an emotionally intelligent leadership style. The other two elements that Feltman identifies, and again, it's a very, very tight, very concise understanding, his book, The Small Book of Trust, is reliability and competence. And I'll just read to you because I don't want to misquote him. It's very, very short, 2 sentences. Reliability is the assessment that you meet the commitments you make and that you keep your promises.
Mm-hmm.
So, to dive into that a little bit, the by when statement, it's like, so I commit to giving you or delivering to you or providing you whatever it is that we've agreed on by, and that really is closing the loop in the commitment and promise. It is to really identify, when am I going to give it to you? So there's a dialogue around that. But once that agreement or that promise is made, the relationship really becomes kind of crucial, I would say. Competence is the assessment that you have the ability to do what you are doing or propose to do. In other words, you're doing what it is that you're hired to do. And so in the workplace, this usually means that the other person believes that you have the requisite capacity, skill, knowledge, and resources to do a particular job or task. So just to recap that: sincerity and authenticity, care, reliability, competence, and we've added a 5th one.
Yes,
BlackWolf has added a 5th one.
yeah.
It seems to resonate with everyone that we've worked with, which is it is the understanding of forgiveness, but it really starts with forgiving yourself.
Wow. If trust isn't big enough, we're going to add forgiveness.
Well, and that's the concept of it. It is really about understanding how it's not being naive and it's not being disingenuous. It's actually being very, very, very empowered and empowering. So empowered when you trust yourself, because there's this self-talk that goes on inside of all of us all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's disempowering self-talk and there's empowering self-talk. And so what we have to do in order to really make the move to empowering self-talk, to an empowering internal dialogue, is to forgive ourselves when we have a disempowering, I can't, or, I failed, or I wasn't good enough, some variation of that. And, just to forgive and let go. Because if you stay focused on that, that's what it is that you'll attract. That's what it is that you will do. So it sounds easy and simple. It takes a good deal of discipline and conscious intent.
Yeah. And we've got to continually go back to it over and over again, because sometimes, we fall off the path and we got to get ourselves back on.
Well, I think that, that we have to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Anything that is worthwhile, requires practice. And so I like to think of it as we just have to never stop practicing. And so these concepts, that's what they are, you put them into practice and then they become actions. But these concepts are crucially important to really reflect on and, if you will, create this culture of beliefs and behaviors within yourself. That's that. And so I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but that's how we influence others.
Yeah. Yeah. So are you saying that we should trust all the time? What happens when people don't earn our trust?
Well, I think this is where the communication it becomes critical. And the practicing care and authenticity or sincerity. There's some great books around communication, like Fierce Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do, if you're fierce, meaning choiceful and rigorous in your conversation, but you're doing it from the place of contribution or care, the receptivity on the other side becomes, we created a 12-month process to reinforce this. It does take a while, but the leaning in, and leaning in is a metaphor for resonant leadership. So I'm doing and being in a way that really is engaging others. And when others are engaged, human beings want to be cared for.
Yeah.
It's really as simple as that. And so anyway, the long answer to your question is communicating where the trust is breaking down. Is the trust breaking down in authenticity? Is the trust breaking down in reliability or competence? Or is the trust breaking down in care? So, if you communicate through those four elements,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of really encouraging someone to demonstrate their trustworthiness, and then be specific. Be specific, and there's a multitude of ways that you can be specific, but that you can feel it when human beings trust each other, and the facility of the trust that we experience is coming through the effectiveness of our communication.
Yeah. Thanks. Great description.
Thanks.
Let's shift a little to control versus influence, if we can, because I think people right now, to varying degrees, feel like they've either lost control, or they're searching for control, or some version of that. What's the perspective you have on what we can control, what we can't control?
Well, the two questions that, we, introduced the webinar, really are the first two questions. There's
Yeah.
actually, then what's the answer?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking you for.
Well,
Share with us.
this I think is in, critically important, and to shift from control and understanding, what the belief that's driving this is. And I think that what drives the effort to control things and others is a disempowering belief. And because, in fact, we don't control anyone else. We influence everyone, but we don't control anyone. The only
We try.
Well, you know how much I like the word "try."
Yeah, yeah.
You try to control it. I mean, how many people?
Where does that come from, Robert? Do you want to tell us a story about try? Who says?
You want me to do my Yoda?
I do.
Yeah. So I like the story in the first Star Wars when Luke is stranded with Yoda on this planet, and his I forget what the jet airplane was called, fighter that he was in, and he's trying to use the force to lift it. And he says to Master Yoda, "But Master Yoda, I'm trying to do my best." And Yoda goes, "No try, Luke. You must do." So that's how I don't think that trying is anything. Try to be better, try to be good at this. Trying is really
and yet we try to control others.
not non-commitment.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think the way that I've always described control and influence is really using concentric circles and saying, if this center circle is the only thing that you control, what is it? And people's lights go on at that moment, and they say, well, that center circle is me. I said, yeah, exactly. So the only thing you control is you. And what is it that you control? And so it gets into a much deeper conversation, but the kind of the entry point is really understanding how reflection or self-awareness is the foundation, and understanding oneself, and then that's the first element. And the second element is really, what's the impact that you want to have? I mean, like literally asking yourself, what's the impact that I want to have? What's the outcome that I want to occur? So between your self-awareness and your intended impact or outcome, you then have the two elements, and the third element is choosing, is the choice. So and there's this course correction process that you just keep going through endlessly. I mean, there is no end to the process. That's why it's called the process. That's why you hear so often it's about enjoying the journey. It's not about really getting to the end point.
Let's talk about that as it relates to how we're dealing as leaders with the pandemic, right? Because people are looking to their leaders, and to what degree can they control anything? What are your thoughts about how leaders engage in control versus influence in that regard?
Well, I'm going to take the first part, Patty. I mean, how leaders are doing. I mean, I am. I have an opinion like everybody else, but what I want to do is I want to talk about the kind of behavior that that human beings want from their leaders
Yeah.
in this uncertain time, this unpredictable, uncertain, volatile. What comes to my mind is, a couple of years ago, I was asked to chair the masterclass on leadership at a mutuality forum at Oxford University. And we really kind of did an in-depth conversation. Broadly, there was like, I don't know, 80, 90 people that were in a conversation about how do we lead in this volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous time. And since that time, we've added the word disruptive. So how do we lead in this moment? And I think that the pandemic or the coronavirus is really, if you will, emphasizing how volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and disruptive this time is. We've been talking about it, throughout this webinar so far, and my perspective to all of us is to practice self-inquiry and self-awareness. Some people call it mindfulness, some people call it meditation, but I think that the way that we ground ourselves is really to kind of reflect. I mean, the first step in meditation is to focus on the breath, that which it gives us life. So, and to really, between being aware and still, and at the same time, recognizing or acknowledging the importance of the breath.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, at this age, we've seen people pass, and that's what is the difference between life and death, is the breath. And what I want to say is, during this time, it becomes critically important to really be aware of life and the breath. I think the phenomena that occurs as a result of that is this grounding, or this, and what I mean by grounding is really feeling like you're connected to this planet that, a lot of us like to call Mother Earth. And I also think, and this is personal, that this time of the COVID virus is directly related to paying attention to the air and the water that give us life, and how we have really polluted the air and the water. I think there's a lot of good conversation and evidence that we really are at a point where it's critical.
And I'd like to just pull you back, if I could, because I know you could talk about that for a long time. But I really want to pull you back to, what are people expecting from leaders? So you're saying grounded. We're looking for our leaders to be grounded, which means present and calm in thought.
We've practiced the webinar questions a lot, and one of the things that I did last night in preparation for today was, one of the questions that is on the top of people's minds. I'll read. We wrote, in this era of the coronavirus outbreak, business leaders are struggling with so much uncertainty, anxiety, and loss of control. How have you seen transformational leaders use trust to successfully navigate this difficult time? So the only way you use trust is to trust yourself, and then that is really the consequence of, or it evolves into trusting others.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wrote down, really off the the expression off the top of my head actually doesn't accurately express it. It's it's really expressing from my heart what it is that I think and feel.
Yeah.
So there's tremendous work that's being done around the science of the intelligence of the heart. And I'll just say simply to our audience, they're finding brain cells in the heart, and how the brain always listens to the heart. So they do these, imaging and electrostimulation, et cetera. So there's these fascinating competencies that we have evolved our science into. But I'll just leave us with the thought is that our brain always listens to our heart. Our heart doesn't always listen to our brain. So that gives us some awareness of how important the heart is, not just in terms of its function, but really as an organ of sensitivity and awareness.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is, demonstrating courage and vulnerability. So those two things sound like they can't exist. Brene Brown has really done a wonderful job at really elevating our awareness of vulnerability. And she asked a group of special forces people that she was talking to, have you ever seen courage demonstrated that didn't involve a demonstration of vulnerability? And she says it was completely silent. No one said anything for a minute. There was about 25 people or so that were all in the SEALs, or I think they were the SEALs. And then one person raised their hand and says, "No, ma'am, never saw vulnerability, never saw courage demonstrated that didn't include some kind of vulnerability." And it was a it's really stuck with me, because I think that, regardless of our politics, the respect for Navy SEALs and the danger that they put themselves in is very high. But that's how courage and vulnerability really are linked. Taking action in the face of fear. So it's not letting fear stop you.
Yeah.
Leading and listening to your heart. Connecting with your compassion. The leaders that we see on television talking about the coronavirus, that are speaking with compassion for the people who have gotten the virus, who are deathly ill or have died, and being and demonstrating empathy and being emotionally intelligent, I think there's tremendous resonance. And there's this feeling that all of a sudden everything dissolves, and I'm connecting with this human being who's being a human being with me, even though they're a leader called a governor or a senator, et cetera. Yeah. So I definitely think that there is a way to demonstrate leadership during the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I think it starts with empowering and leading yourself, and then it's empowering and leading others.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are some good traits. Thanks. Let's just stop for a minute and entertain some questions, because we have a couple that have been asked.
Okay.
So one was asked early on. Thank you, Anonymous. What is a good exercise to practice and build trust and accountability, personal and team?
So, I think the exercise word is I want to move beyond the transactional. So if we use the word exercise from a contextual perspective, who do I need to be in order to do trust, right? So who do I need to be? So I really need to do a fearless inventory, and we all have people whose lives we're interdependent with, our children or our spouses, or from a workplace, it's the team of people that we're working with. So I think that that really doing a fearless inventory and understanding yourself is where it starts. And then if you were to ask,
that requires courage.
Say that again.
That requires courage and vulnerability.
Yes, I mean, I don't know that any growth doesn't require courage and vulnerability.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so I think that, you know, there's a lot of, you know, kind of repetition in, you know, being courageous and being vulnerable, and being courageous and being vulnerable. And I think it starts with trust. And if trusting yourself is really kind of at the root of it, then it's really about being courageous and vulnerable with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that forgiveness is ever far away from that. And I think that choosing to do that with a group of people called your team, and really having authentic, caring conversation is crucial. And so the exercise that I would say is do the values exercise. You know, what are the values that human beings identify are their 5 critical values, and have them talk about that with a sincerity and with you know, a heartfelt feeling of what that means. And so if you have 10 people that are all sharing their values, they might have the same word, but they mean a different thing. I found this from doing many values, is that the depth is how I define integrity is different than how you define integrity. There may be similarities, which is important, but there's also differences, which is also equally important. So I think I would say what is a good exercise is the values exercise.
I would really agree with you on that. I think it changes, I'll say that it changes the room, but it changes the group. And when I know other people's values, I really start to know them. So that's a wonderful building of trust and better understanding. Yeah, it's great. And when I do want to have a accountability conversation, I know what their values are. So it's way easier to have that conversation. Thank you. We have another question. Does trust differ across cultures?
Well, you know, my definition of culture is a system of beliefs and behaviors. So on the face of it, yes, I think that beliefs and behaviors are different in different cultures. And what I can say is, you know, over the last 25 years, and having traveled millions of miles, there's evidence of that. That being said, there is a culture that we all share. It's called being a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we are about is really about creating a culture of courage and authenticity, of vulnerability and sincerity and care and contribution. So I do believe there are a difference in cultures. I think what's common to a lot of cultures, maybe all of the ones that I've encountered, is that there's an element of disempowerment embedded in the culture. Why? That's another webinar.
That must have an impact, though, on trust, right?
It has an impact on relationship.
Sure.
You know, I'm being children and their parents have that breakdown because of the culture that they come from. You know, I've seen, and you have as well, you know, where doing some of the work that we do, the participants come in and they go, I just did this with my family, and that it may be the greatest difference that this program is making for me.
Yeah.
And you know, when you really feel connected to your daughter or your son or your mother or your father, because that's really the principles that we're talking about, there is this belief that if I can do this with these people, I can do this with anyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Thanks. Another question is, does trust and confidence exclude control? Because I trust you, does that mean I shouldn't ask questions?
Does trust, say that again, Patty.
Does trust and confidence, trust/confidence, exclude control? So
No, now I get it.
yeah,
No, absolutely not. It just is about understanding that the only thing I control is me.
yeah,
I mean, I'm open to evidence of people control each other. I think people give up their their autonomy,
mhm,
their self-aware. I think people do that all the time.
yeah,
But do I think that ultimately it boils down to that you choose how you respond. That's it always boils down to that.
yeah,
And as you practice that, it becomes very clear. Yeah, really, Patty, right? I mean, it becomes very clear when you're responding in a way that you just like afterwards go, I can't believe I did that.
yep,
It comes through the channel of anger, or it comes through the channel of righteousness or judgment. I'm right, you're wrong. And I love the expression that I grew up with when I was little: mess it up, clean it up. So that's where you have to really take responsibility
yeah,
and own the impact that you had, and ask for forgiveness. Apologize.
yeah. We have another question here, which I think is a really interesting question. It kind of ties into some follow-up questions, and I want to talk about how you really live this out. And so this was a good one to start us off, because this question is, how does somebody move beyond the feeling of being ineffective?
Yeah, I see that. And hi, Mr. Davis, who asked this question. I think first, it's self-talk. What were you gonna say?
Huge. Yeah.
I took a workshop when I lived in New York City. I was 27 years old. I'm a few years older than that right now.
Mhm.
And I was so, and the workshop was how to win friends and influence people. It was a Carnegie workshop. And there was a quote by Napoleon Hill, which he was born in the 1800s. It's as relevant today as it was when he made it. And I wrote it down, and I still have the card, and I look at it because my handwriting when I was 26 or 7 was really quite different. And the quote says, "I am the dominating thoughts that I allow to occupy my mind."
Mm-hmm.
So the very first step is to be aware that your self-talk is driving the behavior that you are identifying as ineffective.
Yeah.
Then it's about what's the empowering self-talk that will drive being effective, effective behavior. I can't see, certainly from my own perspective, how you can do this without meditating. So, and there's different ways that we meditate. There's different ways that people meditate, but it really is being quiet and focusing on the breath, and really being rigorously honest, fearless with oneself. And so I think that's the beginning, and the action and how does one move beyond is the question.
Yeah.
That's where it begins. It begins with the individual. Really, here comes the big word, right? Loving themselves. In 360, every business life, personal life, relationship. It's about loving yourself. So.
And for those of us who need work on our self-talk, and there are a lot of us, because according to Shad Helmstetter, 85% of our self-talk is negative. I would recommend the book It's a small one. Again, we like small books at
Do.
BlackWolf.
You do.
And it's called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. It's a
Mhm.
wonderful resource, and it helps you to reframe your self-talk, because that's what's really important. And you want to do it in the moment, as close to the moment as possible. So one of the things that it really requires, that I think you're alluding to here, Robert, is self-awareness. So you got
Yeah.
to hear those voices. Very often we're on autopilot. We're not hearing them.
And Patty, I think self-awareness is a multifaceted gem. You know, I mean, there's all these different facets of self-awareness.
Yeah.
And I think using the breath to go in is really deepening and opening yourself up to all of these facets, you know,
Mhm.
all the ways that, you know, we can be self-aware
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
we have to be self-aware of.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll come back to some more questions at the end. I wanted to ask you if you'd share a time when, so I'd like you to make this, practical. Let's bring it to the business world as leaders. That also applies very definitely to any aspect of our life, however we lead. Share a time when a leader used the ability to influence others effectively to achieve great outcomes. Have you got any examples of that, Robert?
I do. Surprisingly enough, I have many actually.
Yes, of course. Yeah. I would hope.
Uh, Say again.
I hope so. I hope our work creates that.
Yes. Um, I think it's the germ of it begins with the desire to contribute or make a difference.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Our intention. Yeah.
yes, you know, it's I'm anchored that that is my purpose. That's my desire for myself,
Yeah.
is to contribute and make a difference. And now I want to contribute and make a difference to, you know, all these other beings that I come in contact with. You know, I'm grateful to have that opportunity. That it's an endless opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, I'm thinking of an individual that I've worked with for many years, and he's always been striving to be better.
Hmm.
Um, and the willingness to be, I'm you know, kind of wanting to craft this as I think, but and speak, the willingness to be and the willingness to understand that being precedes doing.
Yeah.
And that who I'm being drives it, when I operate from this place, when I operate from being first, and let my being inform what I'm going to do or how I'm going to do it, and when I do this from a caring place, everything changes. My results, you know, really increase at a significant level. And so one of the people on this individual's team, this young woman, has said how his willingness to trust her and his willingness to really encourage her to speak her truth, not knowing what her truth was, really began to give her the courage to say what she needed to say. So she declared at the end of this kind of 12-month arc how important that was for her.
Mm-hmm.
So she was acknowledging her leader for really being a space and a voice of encouragement to speak her truth. And for some reason that she needed to figure out, why was she afraid? Why was the fear there to speak her truth? And when she saw that, because our fears are really what holds us back, on one hand. On the other hand, everybody's got them.
Tell me about, this is the same guy that was striving? You said he was.
Well, yes. I mean, he evolved. I mean, his desire to be the best he could be, without knowing what that meant. So this goes to, kind of one of the pieces that we're talking about is how great influencers ask great questions and then listen and seek to understand. So what this gentleman really learned, and he's a global leader, what he learned was that all that he had done to control wasn't producing the kind of result that he wanted and needed, that asking a great question and then listening curiously, listening, empathetically listening, really sincerely listening, and that other person that he asked the question of, what are you most afraid of? Like, what would be the greatest breakthrough that you could imagine for yourself? And so her response was, and I think everybody has, those kernels of responses, but her response was saying what I feel when I feel it. And so her testimonial was, that was it. I always say what I feel when I feel it. And, and I know her, so I know that she was talking through the lens of, really caring and contributing to others.
Nice.
I'll tell you, effectiveness is not complicated. It's not. I read Harvard Business Review from front to cover. The complexity, it's like, can't you guys make this simpler? So being effective is not complex. The circumstances that we're dealing with have a complexity. But, our heart can really, communicate to us, the very simple information, knowledge, understanding. And so this young woman is now, several years later, is recognized as a up and coming, star in her organization, because she's just speaking what she sees that she needs to say.
Yeah.
And it's been fascinating to watch and very fulfilling.
Thank you. So one of the things that we really focus on in BlackWolf is that we focus on transformation to help people transform, right? So I'd like to hear a transformational story, if you would, please. Something around somebody who focuses on influence rather than control. Do you have a story or two for us?
I do. And I'm not going to name her name, but she's one of the people that, are in our seminar right now. And I'm so grateful for her to be here. So what I would say is, this is how I remember the story.
This is always, that's always iffy.
Well, it's like, stories, I think, is what makes the world go round. By the way, Patty, did you know that the word storyteller and raconteur, that's what raconteur means. Raconteur means a storyteller.
Huh. Okay.
Anyway, this woman, and this was iterations ago, and easily 20 years ago. And this work has been going on for more than 20 years. And it was it was a work that was helping the individual and guiding the individual, if you will, to what's their purpose or contribution in life. And it was every different kind of rigor, but every bit as rigorous as our program is today. And I think that that struggle is it's okay. It's fine to struggle, and to, kind of feel challenged. And this program really included all that. And the intent was to really listen to your disempowering self-talk,
Yeah.
or the choices that you had made out of that disempowerment. So, you can go either way. There's an outcome that you produced, and you're looking at this outcome and you're going, how did I get here? How is it that I'm doing this? Well, it was a process, and you got there, and you can get out of that process. Well, she says, and this is after we had worked together for a couple of months, and she is a very, I want to protect her anonymity. She's a very senior influencer in the educational system, that with a role, with a very specific role. And she said to the group that were witnessing, different people that she knew and didn't know, I want to make a declaration. And it's like, okay, so, transformation and declarations are really quite interconnected. So a transformation is a shift in your belief system. It's also a shift in your behavioral system, but beliefs and behaviors are, inextricably connected. So she says, I want to make a declaration, and my declaration is that I'm going to tender my resignation. I'm like, whoa. So she was influencing in a very, very empowering way lots of young lives. But her purpose that really became clear to her through our work was not allowing her to fully express the work that she feels that she was born to do. And so that's what she did. So it was in my opinion, it was a courageous declaration, because she didn't know what was on the other side of that declaration. A lot of times, there's a high ropes process with the hanging ropes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of walk type rope, and you hang onto the rope. Well, the way it's done well is you have to let go of this rope before you can hold on to this rope. So letting go is a crucial quality of transformation, being, and I would say in the indigenous culture, there was no word for answer. So it's like letting go of not having an answer. It's letting go of doing something that doesn't work, even though you don't know what it is that you are going to do after you let that one go.
Thus the resignation. Oof. Yeah, big. Great story. Thank you.
5:56, Patty.
I see that. Let's see. Wrapping up, I think. We have another question there, but I think it would be answered. It could be answered by the book from Shad Helmstetter, which is What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, because it helps you to have more empowering self-talk, and especially during this time with the pandemic, very, very effective material. Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I know that it was a special treat for Robert to have some of his old friends. I know he would want to really turn you on, take off the mute and give you a chance to really have a conversation, but you'll have to do that with him offline. We have recorded this discussion, and we'll share it to all attendees in the next few days. And so we'd love to keep you in the dialogue. So please use hashtag TrustVSControl and the hashtag BlackWolf. It's on social, and connect with our BlackWolf team and and each other. Stay safe. This has been a really fun conversation with our thought leader. Thanks so much, Robert. This has been a treat.
It's gone really fast. Thank you, Patty.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful evening.